I'm not entirely sure why this video is still actually up here on the Telegraph site. The video was posted on the 28th of October in an effort to try to discredit the Occupy protests. The point is that shortly thereafter, the New Statesman posted an actual experiment where it clearly showed that the imaging technology used, thermal imaging technology, doesn't see people inside of tents. And actually, when you stop to think about it, thermal imaging shows heat loss. A site at a cold night like that will glow because it's losing heat to the surrounding environment. Anyone who's gone camping knows that the number one objective that you do in your tent with your sleeping bag is to try to reduce heat loss. I think you might all know the experience of sleeping in a tent overnight. When you feel the surface of your own tent, it isn't warm as your body. People use thermal insulated tents or a large number of wool blankets, which the surface of is rather cold. I mean, on a particularly cold night, if you're snuggled in your bed, feel the covers on top of you. They will not be as warm as the covers underneath you. This is the whole concept of thermal insulation. It's a well-known, well-documented, well-understood human thing. It's also, thermal insulation is often very hard using in trying to find people in landslides or as a military tool for trying to track where Taliban soldiers. If this thing really worked, we would just be able to fly helicopters over Taliban emplacements and see every single person moving on the terrain. We don't. The reason is that human beings have evolved clothing and tents and other structures which are intended to keep them from freezing to death so they don't die. This video implies somehow that thermal imaging is a kind of X-ray that can penetrate through surfaces and show objects within them. It isn't. Thermal imaging just shows heat sources. When you enter into a static air of a tent, close the tent off, and then wrap yourself up into a sleeping bag, you've essentially insulating yourself. You have to do this or you would die. Now, perhaps the Occupy protesters could strip down into their skivvies and start exercising inside of their tents so that they would lose their entire body temperature going down below 35 degrees Celsius so that the tents would radiate a bit in order to prove to the Telegraph that they're in there. But even, a mass suicide like that on the fronts of St. Paul's just in order to heat up a bunch of tents would be a rather strange event. What's really strange here, though, is that we're coming out a week after this has totally been discredited, and yet it's still up on the site, okay? And you wonder, well, why? I mean, couldn't they just say on it, we're sorry, we're apologizing? I mean, normally when they use newspapers, they have to apologize, and they can't run a story again and again on TV after it's discredited. But it shows the kind of toilet that status quo media has turned social media into. Basically, the Telegraph is shitting into your mind via YouTube. It can't show a story over and over again that's totally been discredited. That's a danger to say its profile if it was a TV channel. And it can't also run a news story that's been discredited over and over. But it can post to YouTube and just fail to take it down or fail to update it once it's discredited. A number of people who don't know the facts will come to this via search engines and other particular ways in Google. This video comes up very high when you go Occupy thermal images. It still comes up top on my Google search, which means a lot of people will actually look into this and actually really believe it's true, that the tents are empty, even though it's scientifically been proven that this isn't true. But the Telegraph doesn't care because the Telegraph isn't there to inform you. The Telegraph is there to work for the status quo institutions in the UK that basically don't want things like Tobin taxes or Robin Hood taxes or reforms on the banks. They're particularly very, very concerned that a Robin Hood tax or series of taxes on the bank may bring the deficit down significantly in a very short amount of time, which would take away the justification for the large cuts in social services. Cuts in social services, are not there to cure the deficit. The deficit is there to justify cuts in government spending for ordinary people. So basically, the Telegraph is just being a bag of shit here. They're basically They know it's wrong. They must know it's wrong because people have been tweeting them and replying to them on social network. This is a kind of an embarrassing thing, but they're not into dignity and stuff here. They're into trying to side the political debates across lines they're in. They're really more into the disinformation than the information campaign. And they know that even though their newspaper, they might not be able to get away with running blatant falsifications like this on a regular basis that have been discredited to the extent this has, they can leave it on YouTube, knowing that it'll get in Google, knowing that it will go viral, that it will seep out there. They're just sort of like, they just leave it there and then walk away and say, well, it's just on YouTube. And I think really, it's the duty of a self-regulating community to kind of eye out this crap and really just let these people have it. This is this is just terrible. These people, whoever did this report, whoever carried this out, didn't do basic research. Whoever did this, took these heat scanners and heat scanned the tent, probably didn't talk to anyone and said, oh, by the way, does this work? Oh, actually, no. Oh, okay. Well, the people who read this on TV won't know. They'll assume thermal is something like X-ray. Well, a few days of discrediting, It's, from what I understand, when the New Statesman actually decided to actually do this, they didn't have very much doubt. They were basically understood from people who actually use this technology to try and search for people, particularly military technology, to try to use this, that you really can't see inside of tents with this technology. Probably also, I would imagine, the Telegraph knew that. Well, maybe the Telegraph, they were chumped. Maybe the Telegraph is like News of the World and they didn't know they were being played. But I would suspect that somebody knew that thermal imaging is a great way to make a tent look empty. And they were hoping to get the Occupy London thing unpopular and quickly have the police come and shove them out. Of course, this has now failed. The Occupy London is now drawing a lot of attention. It's starting to really put words in the mouths of politicians rather than the media putting words in their mouths. So, the Telegraph keeps it up at its own expense, I guess.